Hello and welcome to Step Into Me, the podcast where we explore what it truly means to find the courage to be true to yourself. I'm Belinda Lee, and today we are talking divorce, separation and breakups, and that age-old question, should I stay or should I go? My guest is someone whose work might already be familiar to many of you. Dr Gabrielle Morrissey is a global expert in sex and relationships. She's authored 3 internationally selling books, has trained relationship counsellors across the world. She's the CEO of Australia's Women's Resilience Centre and pens the divorce diaries for Mamma Mia. But beyond her impressive credentials, Dr Morrissey has also walked this path.
I fell prey, so to speak, to being love bombed, but I also say often there is no person that has any guarantee that their relationship will work out. Not just because, I might be a quote expert and know more, but life is constantly throwing curveballs at us. And so we just never know what's coming. We can be in deep, authentic, genuine, passionate love at one stage in the relationship, and that still doesn't mean that a long-term monogamous, decades era spanning marriage is going to work. It's just not, well, we can have this argument or not have this argument, but many would say it's not actually a natural human condition to be monogamous with one partner for their whole life. It's a cultural construct. And so we fight a lot of different circumstances in our lives to stay in a relationship with one person across our entire lifespan. It's a huge challenge to us as humans to do that.
I've often said it should be a 5-year contract.
Yes, and then you can choose to renew. It's funny, but there's a serious element to that idea, which is that's really what counseling couples is all about, is checking into where you are. I mean, you should do it more often than 5 years, actually, and stop the tendency to grow apart and really keep checking in that you're tracking together on the same page, heading in the same direction with the same goals and dreams, because you are not, when you get married, you don't turn into one person. A healthy relationship has 2 distinct individuals still in it. You're 2, as Khalil Gibran says, you're still 2 separate pillars to build a solid foundation. If you became one, the whole thing wobbles and falls over. So you really need your individuality, but that means constantly checking in with one another to make sure that you're going in the same direction at the same time, with the same aims and experiences and wishes and goals, and that's where the challenge lies.
So in hindsight, is there anything that you would have done differently? I mean, do you think that we should be more aware of things like love bombing?
Definitely people should be looking for love bombing, because it's a sign of an unhealthy relationship to come, which is, it's sort of like that adage, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So if someone is purporting to meet your every single need and it's every dream come true and you never argue and everything you ever wanted is wrapped into one person who is just, your Prince Charming, your everything in the fairy tale for you, that's just not real life. And you need to sort of pop that bubble and look more critically at that person and how well you actually know them beyond the facade. Because when you're dating, everybody puts on their mask and their best foot forward. And if you are rushing, because love bombing is usually short term. So those are those whirlwind romances. I eloped. That was red flag number probably about 10, and I'd ignored several. You really need to look at getting to know your partner before you get into legal contracts and involve buying property and things like having babies and permanent things that are more difficult to undo, because it's through time that mask comes down. So, things like if you take a trip together, if you meet each other's families, like these are all, quote, traditions, but they have good solid science underneath them to test through that biochemical and sociological mask that we put on when we're in limerence or that lust mode. So you really do want to challenge one another before you make a major commitment, so you know what you're getting into in terms of the downs as well as the ups. So that's something I would have changed, the rushing into marriage. And I think take a good look at what's motivating you to get married too. A lot of times you hear about people who want the wedding but not the marriage, or they've fallen in love with the fairy tale, or they've left it too late in their own mind. They think, oh, it's now or never. This is my chance to have kids. I better just do it. And so they rush into something which is, kids is the worst motivator to have a marriage, because things only get harder and more complicated with kids. If I had the formula, everybody would want it, and it would, I would have the winning formula, which I don't. But there are definitely things that we need to look at in terms of green flags, red flags, even beige flags, and what is motivating you to make that commitment, and how much have you thought it through, and how much of your own network have you brought in, and what do they think? There are warning signs if none of your friends like him or your family doesn't even know him. Take a look at what those signs are telling you.
When we think separation or divorce, we might assume that, things have turned nasty or lots of arguments and this sort of thing. But sometimes it's just a feeling inside, or an emptiness, feeling lonely in the relationship. Or people, as we know, just sometimes drift apart. You end up on different paths. But what are some of those flags that we should be looking out for?
Well, the red flags that are there at the outset won't disappear. People don't change very easily. I mean, that's the whole point of counseling, is to try to inspire people to learn how to do things or respond to things differently. It's very, very difficult. We have to be taught how to do it. So when you're dating somebody, when you see their behaviors, you should take them for what they are. That's who they are, and they're showing you. So you can't think, oh, it was just something he did because he was, extraordinarily stressed. Well, then you have that piece of information now that's how he's going to be when he's extraordinarily stressed. That's just not a one-off thing. So your red flags are really there's several different kinds. There are the smaller ones, in that these are things that could create conflict. And then there are really big ones that have to do with character and respect and communication. Those won't change unless you work very hard at it. So if you have communication difficulties at the start, you're going to have them a year in and 5 years in. Any kind of disrespect or disregard or controlling possessiveness in today's world, with technology tracking and the demand to want to know where your partner is, where you are, that's a big red flag, because you need to have some autonomy and individuality in your relationship. That's freedom. And so if you're giving that up, or being not just coerced, but sort of threatened or teased, or anything that makes you feel like you don't have your own free mind and free will, that's a huge red flag. So you need to be able to have your freedom of choice. And there are studies that show, still today, 2025, that there are men who, a third of men in Australia actually, and global studies are around that sort of 1/3, 1/4 of men believe that they have the veto power in a relationship for decisions, that anything's negotiable, but then they have the bottom line say. And also they have the right, not the choice, but the right to know where their partner is. So these are slippery slopes to go down in a relationship. You need to build trust, have good communication, and know that you are free in your relationship. You're free to go. You're free to choose them every day. And it's a mutually respectful choosing relationship. Even if it's legally binding, you still make that choice to be in that relationship. And this is what we're seeing less and less of as more women start to report that they feel controlled. So that's a huge red flag.
I think it was Maya Angelou who said, when people show you who they are, believe them. It's so true.
Exactly.
So how do we distinguish between, say, normal relationship challenges, and every relationship has its challenges, and those deeper problems that maybe we should start thinking about moving on?
There's some really interesting research around this, and the first thing that I'm going to say, at the risk of sounding non-scientific, non-academic, and a little woo-woo, is actually there is science around female intuition. So if something in your, and I'm speaking to women here, unhealthy relationships happen to men and women, but in terms of this piece of research, the female intuition, that gut feeling that you're not aligned really with your value set or what you know to be right, know how you ought to be heard, being treated, respected, that is a very powerful force that we tend to silence because we have all kinds of other conditioning and people pleasing and gender norms that silence that female intuition. So an unhealthy relationship, first of all, has that little voice where it's telling you, or that feeling that's telling you something is not right here. Like, this is going on too long, too long. And when women tell you that they've left after the final straw was when he had that fight and called me names in front of the kids, or when the kids finally got involved, when you hear about that element of, but then he brought the kids into it and that was the final straw, you know that there are months, if not years, of that kind of pattern of behavior affecting just them, where their voice has been quashed down. And we need to learn to listen to our voices earlier. It doesn't mean we have to just rush out and leave, but we have to address, what is it saying that isn't right? And who can I talk to about that? Because is this a sign of an unhealthy relationship or an abusive relationship? A relationship that is going through conflict where we can find our way back in a healthy communication and way and rebond, or a relationship that has been going down this road for far too long and it's time to actually be free of it because it's never going to change. So to learn the differences between that, first is what are you telling yourself? What have you been telling yourself in the quiet nights? What's it like if he goes away and then he comes back on a work trip? They might say, it was fantastic. And then, but when he comes home, there's like just a bad vibe that hits the house, or he comes home from work and it's back to eggshells, or I brace myself because I know a fight is for sure going to come, or he opens that bottle of drink and I know in 2 hours we'll be fighting. So if you can see what the patterns are, you're in a relationship that's not healthy, and you need to look at how bad they are in order to determine, is this salvageable or is it abuse and control, and you've actually better off being out of it. So I can't stress counseling enough, because that's really hard to just see by yourself when you're in it. You have to articulate it to a counselor. And I say counselor rather than girlfriend. We can do it with friends and family, but usually when you bring somebody in that you know, they have their own agenda and they're not trained to kind of bracket that to the side, because they'll bring their own thoughts and perceptions and feelings and cloud it even more. And so the good thing about counseling is it's neutral. They just want what's best for you, or to hold up a mirror so you can figure it out for yourself.
So do you think it's harder to leave when you're in a relationship with, say, a narcissist? And I'm asking this question for personal reasons, because I spent the best part of a decade in a relationship which should have ended years and years and years beforehand. But it was just that constant cycle of the criticisms, and then my memories or reality was somehow twisted and turned to the point where I would feel like I was going crazy, talk about leaving and moving on. And then that's when they just give you that little glimpse, that little bit of hope that this relationship could be fantastic. And then suddenly things go well again for a while, until those criticisms and all that sort of thing start. And then, of course, there's the guilt attached with that, because you think, why did I ever feel badly about this person? Is it harder? Because I just felt myself going crazy and didn't know which way was up for a while. So what do you say to the person who's in that kind of relationship?
Well, there's really two versions of that. There's the person that somewhere, either deep down or not so deep down, knows they're with a narcissist. And so they know that they're in the cycle, and there are lots of other powerful motivators keeping them there that are very valid. No judgment, extremely valid. It might be children, it might be finances, it might be low self-esteem, it might be messages, it might be just comfort and familiarity, and not wanting to live life alone. There's fear, there's all kinds of reasons why people choose a bad relationship over no relationship. So there's people who know what they're in and they're struggling with how to cope with it. And then there are people who either don't know what a narcissist is, or they don't believe that their partner is a narcissist. And so they don't know the cycle that they're in, and they can't recognize the signs. They see the pattern, but they don't see how manipulated they're being with tactics like breadcrumbing and gaslighting, which is, altering your reality to make you think not just that you're crazy, but that you're remembering everything wrong, and you could never win an argument because they're constantly changing reality on you and memories on you. And breadcrumbing, when, you'll hear people will say, when it's good, it's amazing, it's great. And you're getting just enough of that good to keep you sort of down the trail of the relationship, because there's just tiny bits of treats along the way. Whereas the rest of the time, when it's bad, it's really bad. So it's particularly complicated when somebody's in a relationship with a narcissist and they don't see the patterns and they don't know quite what they're dealing with, and they recognize it after they've left. And again, it comes down to, how do you feel in your relationship? When you wake up, are you looking forward to the day? Do they make you feel like you're added value to the relationship and your shared life together? Is there more good than bad? Do you enjoy doing things together? Or are there lots of put downs and critiques? Are there mocking, that mean humor? Have things become where there's more negative than positive? Because really, in a relationship, in this day and age, we expect some form of equality. It may not always look exactly equal. And if you listen to Brene Brown, she goes through this, the two of you make up to be 100. So you may not always be 50-50 in terms of contribution and energy, domestic labor, but emotional connection. But when you're honest and communicating and saying, I've got so many other things going on with work and my ill mother, and I've only got 30, then your partner very lovingly will say, I've got 70 to give to the relationship then. I've got 70 to give to you. I'll give a little more while you've got less, and vice versa, back and forth. When you have that kind of mutually respectful, openly communicative, you can say that without feeling worry, anxiety, guilt, shame. That's a healthy relationship. If you feel any of what I've described, you're in an unhealthy relationship, and that's when it really takes counseling. And if you go into a counseling session with a narcissist and you start to see elements of gaslighting, blaming you because most narcissists can't take any kind of personal responsibility, or they're shifting the story, or love bombing the therapist, as in trying to be super charming and shifting the dynamic, and you kind of like, who is this person in this counseling session? I don't know this person. Then you're dealing with a narcissist and someone who's not bringing their authentic self into the room, and it's going to be very difficult to create something healthy with someone who's not being authentic with you. If you don't recognize them, run. It's time to call it for what it is. And that's very difficult for many women to do. And many women who've left a narcissist will say they waited way, way, way too long, because the tactics are very compelling. Their whole design is to keep you with them. So it's very difficult to leave.
Well, one of the reasons, as you know, that I got in touch with you was because I absolutely loved one of the responses that you gave on the Mamma Mia site on the Divorce Diaries. It was to a woman who loved her husband, but felt that they were no longer in love with each other and they sort of had that empty feeling. And she wanted to know, should she just suck it up and stick it out? But you suggested counselling, but not of the ordinary type of counselling. This was counselling to potentially transition a split, which I just thought was fantastic. I'd never heard of it before. So can you elaborate on how beneficial that type of counselling can be?
Sure, and I think this is a new area of counseling that people don't realize is out there for you. I think it was laughed about with the whole Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin conscious uncoupling, but that's really what it means. If you're looking at parting ways and it's in a situation like that where you can just tell the relationship is come to its use by date, it's not serving each of you the way you are now as people needing to be loved, if you're not happy just in this sort of empty companionate relationship and one or both of you want something more. There hasn't been a great big dramatic betrayal ending that has that fiery anger to it. Couple therapists will often talk about a pendulum when they're dealing with clients, and they'll go, oh, this is a very passionate couple. Their pendulum swings from hot, lustful passion on the one end, and then they'll swing right the way over to anger and betrayal and hate. And that's really how you can get couples who've experienced, say, cheating, for example, to come back to getting over it and being together, because they're passionate. You've got energy and emotion and care and investment, emotional investment to work with. The apathetic couples, where they're done more than lost their mojo, they've lost all kind of positive regard for each other outside of that sort of friend zone. They're just apathetic. They're in the middle, and their pendulum barely swings. They're in the sexless marriage. Their needs aren't being met. They've long lost. They've maybe tried counseling to stay together over and over before. They bargained to stay together until the kids were older and out, and they question now, why are we in this together? So there's lots of reasons one would go to a counselor to try to stay together, because that's what they've one or both of them have determined that's what they really want. But there are a lot of couples that need help transitioning to separating. They need to come to the realization to feel validated that that's an okay place to be, that this relationship has served its purpose and given each other a great amount of joy and freedom and all the things relationships can bring you. But then if you get to a point where it no longer serves that original purpose and you haven't found new purpose together as parents or business partners or whatever that other people stay together for, then having someone counsel you through how to be your better self when you're splitting, as opposed to the worst version of yourself, because we tend to gravitate towards what feels good and then we avoid things that feel bad. So when you're going through a split and you're not wanting to hurt them, or you're not wanting to sit with your discomfort, and you're having to have the conversations with your friends and family that you're divorcing, and some people will feel, I know I did, a huge feelings of failure, that I didn't do it. I didn't do what we're supposed to do, which is get married and then stay together and make it work. So there's all kinds of reasons why people don't bring their best selves to a split. There's all these negative feelings internally. That's when resentments that they've been feeling come out, or just even going through the physical split of who's going to live where and who's going to have the dog, and who, do we sell and split, or do all those practical decisions, to be coached through how you can have good regard for each other through that process and after that process, without losing the memory and sight of there was something, you loved that person in the beginning. You shared a lot with that person, and that bond is part of your story. Even if you don't ever share another story, let's say you don't have kids and you've got nothing, you're never going to see them as the shared grandchildren or anything again, you still have in your life experience stories and memories of intimacy, deep intimacy with that person. that may not be sexual. It may be, the comforting that comes from someone knowing you really, really well. And so being able to have that positive experience in splits is ultimately what will heal you faster to enable you to move on with your life, whether that's another relationship or not, and have a better experience rather than a worse experience.
So let's say that you've been to counselling or you've reached the decision for yourself that it's time, the relationship is over, kaput, there's no turning back. Is there a right way to end a relationship? I mean, how do we take that first step?
Oh, that is a really good question, because it's hard to answer specifically because everybody's situation is different. Why are you ending it, really? If it's not because of a dramatic deal breaker, a total betrayal of one of the rules and expectations you have / vows in your relationship, but it's nobody's done anything that wrong. It's just not a healthy or happy relationship, and it's come to its absolute end. If you've tried everything and you want to try everything, let's assume you haven't fallen wildly in love with somebody else. Like, that's your attention hasn't been pulled in a different direction, that you're trying to end this relationship because of your feelings within it, and you just feel it can't be fixed. Then hopefully it's not going to come as a big surprise, because if it comes as a big surprise, that means that you have not been communicating and you haven't given them or the relationship a chance. And if they've done nothing wrong, where things could have turned around had they been given that chance, it's a bit of a red flag if it's in that kind of unhappy, lonely state for so long and they haven't noticed. The not noticing is a big indicator that you're in an unhappy and unhealthy relationship. But people can live in routines for a long time, really not paying attention to their partner, or that it was that bad. I've actually heard people come into the counseling room and he will say, I didn't know it was this bad. I didn't know she was on the brink of leaving. Just not paying attention and needing to light the fire again and pay attention and not get into that take for granted mode. But is there a right way to end it? Well, hopefully if it isn't coming as a giant surprise, the right way is, it's not that, you shouldn't do it with a Post-it note or any of those sort of iconic bad moves. You shouldn't leave and then send them a text, you've left. It's what is going to feel to you that you've done the right thing. I've sat with couples, and I know I felt this myself, where because of the kids, they've stayed longer, and they've wanted to be able to say to the kids when the kids were older, I honestly tried everything. And that was their, I came to the end. I sat down and said, it's over. I've got nothing left to give. We've tried everything. I can honestly, hand on heart, say, I tried everything. So you don't owe that to your kids. That's a parental decision. But you may want to feel like you owed that to yourself. So if you feel like you've given this relationship everything that you can, where you're at now, it's not for you anymore. Being able to end it with the respect that this is somebody who's been your partner, assuming they haven't treated you terribly, disrespectfully, and remembering that there was something in the beginning that brought you together. So ending it is on a sort of moral and emotional level. Is it aligned? Again, that intuition. Is it aligning with, do you feel like you're handling this well? But then it's also, we tend to be conflict avoiders. How are they going to take it? And if you feel at all unsafe or worried, then, obviously you have to make sure that somebody in your life knows that you're going to be finishing it, and you want your support system around you, because you never really know how you're going to react to when the finality of it hits.
Well, we always tend to focus on the ending side of breakups, don't we? But of course, with every ending, there is the opportunity for a new beginning. And Dr. Morrissey, I love this. You released a podcast a couple of years ago on the divorced sexologist about the 5 gifts that divorce gave you, which were peace, financial freedom, time with girlfriends, being selfish, and finding yourself again. So, can you talk us through some of the positives of separation? And are there any others that you would add to the list today?
Oh, 100%. I really think we don't have the same stigma about being a divorcee kind of thing that we have one or more marriages under our belt. But, maybe it's Bridget Jones, maybe it's various things. When you're single and your life is surrounded by couples and you're having to, when you get divorced, you're splitting everything that you built. It feels like destruction. It feels like that you're not creating something new. It feels like you have to tease everything apart, something you have, if you're lucky, half. And even you're splitting apart your friends and the neighborhoods where you used to hang out together. And so that negativity is still very pervasive. Add to that a lot of women, when they divorce, are worse off if they have children. They struggle to get the child support that they rightly deserve. They do the lion's share of child rearing as a single parent. And then they're juggling probably having to earn more and pay more because now you've got your own household and you're not a shared utility situation. So there's a lot of negative that people focus on, and they don't focus on the new chapter and all the positives that come from being your own person as well as being single. I'll joke with my girlfriends going, I'm not sure I'll ever share a house again. I love sleeping diagonally across the bed. I love not having to compromise what's on television, or that, I don't have to cook dinner if I don't feel hungry. I love that. So there are lots of positives around creating your life in that life stage that you're at, whether you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. It's a new opportunity to grow within yourself and find joy that's different than it would have been in a relationship. And a lot of it comes around having a chance to just go through a bit of a positive, selfish stage of, what do I want for me? How do I want to spend this time for me? And I want to have my girlfriends over and have them spend the night and go on girlfriend trips and have a quiet house and listen to whatever music I want to on my terms. Buy the dog I've always wanted or the cat that I've always wanted because they were allergic. Indulge those things that are just for you. And we don't talk about all of those as being advantages as much as we focus on the loss that comes through divorce. And it is, it can feel like a loss, and there are grief stages to go through. But then there's huge excitement and newness and possibility that you can explore that's all fabulous. Allow it to be fabulous and not stressful and anxious. And so I think we need to think more positively about the new you that can emerge out of a relationship.
So, in your decades of experience, have you ever met people who regret their divorce?
Absolutely. I've had people regret their divorce. I've had men and women regret their divorce. And the regret often comes from the not doing rather than the doing, because when you do something bad, you can try and fix it or get forgiveness or work it out. It comes from I didn't try counseling. I just decided to split. I should have tried. I didn't talk and try to talk it through and try to reconnect. There was probably more I could have done. I thought it was going to be easier and that we'd automatically have a great post-relationship as friends and co-parents because we'd been such a great partnership in marriage. I didn't know that the pain was going to create this much dissonance and conflict. And so in hindsight, I wish I'd tried harder for a bit longer in the marriage. People have regrets, and that's not to say that they're valid regrets. It's just if things haven't turned out in the new chapter the way they anticipated possibly, then the grass is always greener in hindsight, or it's rose-colored glasses. So whether they regret the divorce doesn't mean necessarily they made the wrong decision or the wrong choice. It's not a good idea to live your life with what ifs. We'll drive ourselves crazy and we'll never have confidence in our decisions and connection with our own growth and the pathways of our lives, whether we're alone or in a relationship with somebody. At any given moment, even the happiest looking couple will have times when they have conflict. It's definitely not as good as it appears because relationships are difficult for everybody. 100%. That's your only guarantee, is that there will be difficulties. Like you can look at any given time and think, oh, well, if we'd moved to Denmark instead of here, we would have been happier. If we hadn't bought that boat, we wouldn't be fighting about it. We'd be happier. If I hadn't said that I had fantasies about our neighbor, then we wouldn't have had a big fight, and that wouldn't have opened this can of worms, and we wouldn't be splitting up, and we'd be happier. You can make yourself crazy thinking that way. You have to deal with what is rather than what if.
So how can family and friends best support someone going through a divorce? Because we often hear stories, don't we, of people who lose their friends because of divorce or separation. What's your advice?
Oh, if someone's telling you that they're splitting up, I think one of the worst things you can do is say, "Good, I always hated him," because there's a possibility they could end up back together. But also, you want to be supportive of where they're at and not question the choices that they've made leading up to that. That's judgmental. So really, the friendship is there to say, well, what can I do to support you? Okay, you need some time on your own, so you can divert, distract, just be an emotional support, be a sounding board, try to be as judgment-free as possible. Don't jump to solutions too, because everybody's situation is different. And just because you've gone through a divorce and it was painful and involved the courts and, just wait, in about a month he's going to turn into the biggest monster you never saw coming. Well, just because your ex did that doesn't mean that her ex is going to do that. So you have to try to not see things through your own lens and just be there for them. And it's a lot of asking questions. What do you need? Do you want me to bring you lunch? Do you want to go out for the night? Do you want to come spend the night? Do you want to go to the movies? So asking them what they need and providing suggestions. And a friend shouldn't feel like they need to provide the answers or the solutions, because most of them are not trained to do it. And it's a difficult terrain because nobody knows what each day brings. When you're in a split, it is a roller coaster.
And on that score, should we ever get involved? If we think someone is in a bad relationship, should we speak up?
That is a really hard one. That's a whole other podcast, because there can be a bit of danger involved, frankly, for a friend. As much as we might want to say that a friend can be a lifeline, literally, to a friend, there are instances of exes taking vengeance out on the friends if they think that there's been meddling with someone, if they're a coercive controller, or, someone who's very powerful and has the upper hand in a imbalanced power dynamic in a relationship. So there's only so far a friend should go into the intricacies of a relationship. But what you can do when you're with your friend and their abusive partner is nowhere around is you can drop hints around, I noticed he said something that I don't like that he's saying that to you. I just want to, as your friend, I think you should be treated better. As your friend, I don't think he should call you names. You can take that kind of tact and just point things out, because you're voicing probably her inner voice. So she knows she's not alone in that. If you don't have that kind of a relationship, you can do nothing. That option is there for you. But if you love and care for them and wish better for them, there are ways to be able to say that, and ways to be able to say, if you want support, you want me to take you anywhere for, some professional advice or to someone that can help you through this, I will help you, and I will take you to the nearest service or counselor or whatever who can refer you to more professional help. You shouldn't get involved in terms of trying to get someone to safety until they've met and spoke with someone who can do exit planning and safety planning and making sure that they do it in a really, really safe way. But mostly if it's a coercive controlling situation, the more common scenario is, how does a friend point out unacceptable behavior that's actually abusive, but they can label it as questionable behavior to someone that's still in the relationship, just by saying, you want them to be more respected and more loved and cared for. And if you're unhappy or you're thinking that things could be better, a really great share is to say, I've always thought going to counseling or talking to somebody or calling one of those lifeline type numbers has been really helpful. And, I never told anybody, but I did it. I called. Even if you're lying, you're still telling them that it's okay to call and reach out for help.
Well, you are the CEO of the Women's Resilience Centre in Australia, which not only offers support, but capability building and employment readiness programs for women who have found the courage to leave some of the worst types of relationships, which is just fantastic that they have these supports available to them. But for the person who is in such a relationship, and if they happen to be listening to this podcast, what is the first step for them?
Again, you can't be formulaic around it. Everybody has to assess their own risk. And that's why there's no judgment around women who've chosen to stay far too long in situations that held big personal risk to safety, risk to their emotional resilience and balance. So a woman can either call and make immediate plans to leave and leave into safety, either with the police or through the shelter systems and the domestic violence services, or they can start planning. So there's exit planning and there's safety planning. So both are important. Safety planning is making sure that you are safe where you are and safe in the steps forward that you want to take. And exit planning is, how are you going to get out? Is this something that you want to leave immediately overnight in the dead of night, secretly, quietly, because if you give him any forewarning, things will get radically worse fast? Or is it that you have some time, it's awful but bearable, it's not a risk to your physical safety, so maybe you do want to take a look at what would you expect in court? What job could you have if you don't have a job right now? Can you set up a bank account at a different bank than the one you bank at right now or bank at together? Like, what steps can you take to make sure you've got the paperwork set up that you need and your self-reliance pre-built so that you're not, if you don't have to flee in the middle of the night and then do all that once you've left, you can do bits and pieces of that. Put yourself into planning mode, because then that also gives you hope and it gives you something, a goal to work towards, and you know that you can see where the light is at the end of the tunnel and you're working towards it. You have to keep yourself very safe in the meantime, because that when a woman is planning to leave is her most dangerous time. But if she's in a coercive, controlling relationship, it's a way of also clawing back a little of the power and control. It's just you're doing it secretly. So many, many women are in this kind of situation. And it might take them a matter of days or it might take them a matter of years before they actually leave. And if they can call a service and get advice on how to do it safely and practically so that they have everything that they need set up for when they're on their own, then they'll probably end up with better outcomes. And that's what services like the Women's Resilience Center are set up to do. They have mentors. These are all women who either have some skill to give and advice to give on employment and jobs, or they are down the road of having lived through domestic violence and abuse. They're just years forward and now wanting to help a woman who's just starting that leaving journey, and can offer not counseling, but just shared wisdom that they've gained along trekking that road. And we do try to, if we have narcissistic situations, the person who's leaving a narcissist can often best be helped by someone who's navigated a narcissist before.
So, Dr. Morrissey, before we wrap up, if someone listening is still undecided, they've listened to this episode and they're still asking, do I stay? Do I go? What are the pros? What are the cons? What are your parting words for that person?
That period of time, whether it's a short time or a long time, where you are really thinking, do I stay or do I go? What happens if I stay? What happens if I go? How do I know I'm making the right choice? What is entailed? Who do I affect? Whichever choice I make, who else is affected? And so there's just a couple of final words. One is, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to have peace in your house. Your house is your sanctuary. You deserve to feel safe in your life, and you deserve to feel like you're a free human. So if you don't feel like you're experiencing those things, one, know that you have the right to them. You have the right to them and you deserve them. And if you think you can achieve those by working on your relationship and having clearer communication with your partner about how far away from that you are, that's often a good place to start. If you know in your heart of hearts and that inner voice is telling you, you've really tried it all, there's no hope for this, you've got to get out, then visualize what your next chapter could be, and don't let it be led by fear, because life will work out for you. Visualize what it can actually hold for you and become, and try to be excited by that. Because there will be sadness and, like we've said, turbulence in that transition, but because you deserve freedom and love and joy in your life and personal happiness, just listen to yourself about which pathway, which choice is going to lead to that sooner rather than later, because life is finite and we get this one life. Regardless of your beliefs, this is it in the way that you are, how you are now. This is your one life. And that was honestly the phrase that finally tipped me over the edge. I was like, we get one life, and I have spent far too much of it not in that place of personal happiness. And I made a move. So maybe this is your invitation to do the same.
I love that. That's such good advice. Dr. Gabrielle Morrissey, thank you for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your compassion, and of course your lived experience through all of this as well. It's been so insightful. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe or follow, and feel free to give the pod 5 stars or leave a review. If you have any questions or would like to get in touch, simply head to stepintomepodcast.com. I'm Belinda Lee, and you've been listening to Step Into Me, helping you find the courage to be true to yourself.